Now, our two co-founders, Gordon Moore and Robert Noyce, were made famous not just for starting Intel, but for other reasons as well. Like Gordon Moore, father of Moore's Law, and Robert Noyce, a successful inventor who invented the integrated circuit. Right? And we'll see examples of both the integrated circuit and Moore's Law to travel through the history portion of our tour. Now, here you can see an example of the very first thing that Intel made as a memory chip. It's called the 3101 memory chip. It was a piece of computer memory that was invented to replace magnetic core memory, what you see on top here, which is what computers used prior to the chips. And one of the biggest differences you can see between the two pieces of technology is the core memory, rather large, about the size of the palm of your hand, and the chip there was far smaller. So huge breakthrough considering its tiny size. And it was computer memory that established Intel as one of the world's largest chip makers. Not only were the semiconductor chips smaller, more energy efficient, they were easier to produce. Core memory was hard to make. They made one at a time by hand, making it very pricey. Chips, though, are made on on wafers in large quantities. Here you can see an example of a silicon wafer, a disk on which many chips can be made all at the same time, cut out and then placed into the middle of a package. And there in the middle of the package, you will see just one of the many rectangles you see below on the wafer there in the middle. Moving on, we'll take a look at Intel's first microprocessor, the 4004. Back in 1969, we were still just a very small startup company. A company from Japan gave us the opportunity to build and design the 12 custom chips that would power the Busicom adding machine, this rather large calculator. Initially they wanted 12 chips. We improved upon the design, reducing the number of chips from 12 to 4. The main brain of this calculator that did all the math you see here in this large model. A chip called the 4004, which was the first general purpose processor, as it was known, a chip whose functions could be changed by the programs that were stored in its memory. This large model here shows you the circuits as well as the 2,300 tiny transistors, enabling this chip to perform 60,000 instructions in a single second. The chip you see here in this large model, you actually see the real chip. So if you look at this acrylic brick, towards the top there you will see 5 little silver rectangles, and that's what you're looking at in this large model. Intel's very first microprocessor, forever changing the world of consumer electronics and how they were designed. And moving on, we can take a look at some of the other devices that use Intel's chips. Devices such as the Altair 8800. This was a computer that was sold to you out of the back of a popular electronics magazine. This cost you $439 way back in 1975. Used the Intel 8088 chip inside of it. This was a computer that was sold out of the back of a magazine. You couldn't even buy it in a store. It was sold to you as a kit, so you have to assemble it from tiny pieces. Once you did, you got a computer that had no monitor to look at, no keyboard, not even a mouse. Now, this computer here would be programmed not by typing with a keyboard, but by flipping these little toggle switches either up or down, entering binary code. So it would take you a very long time to program this using zeros and ones. And your only output would be to observe and record the flashy blinky lights here. That is it. Used for very basic functions, things like mathematical computation, and also write some very basic computer programs. This is the first home computer. Moving on, we'll take a look at the first personal computer. IBM. Here's the first PC made by IBM, made in 1981 using the Intel 8088 chip you see down there. This computer here started the PC revolution by finally making it possible for all of us to have computers in our homes and in our classes the way we do today. It had a screen so you could easily see what you were doing instead of trying to interpret cryptic blinky lights. You had a keyboard allowing you to easily type into your computer instead of using switches and binary code. So it was much easier to use compared to previous models. Yet, even compared to today's though, it was missing some things. Didn't have a mouse quite yet in 1981. Also did not have a hard drive, so you had to store all your data onto a floppy disk. Now, this is the first PC. Moving on here, I'll show you some other pretty cool chips that came just after that one. So you can see these screens here are the Explore Intel History screens. You can go and explore history going through the different decades. You can home in on an individual year. Like the very next year after that computer came out, this one, 1982, we introduced the 286 microprocessor, which was a chip that contained over 134,000 transistors on it, and also was backwards compatible, which meant consumers could purchase an old computer, a new computer, and use the software from their old machine, which is a trend you see even today. In 1985, we went from the 286 to the 386, which had 275,000 transistors and enabled computers to multitask, local area networks, and the color graphics we might take for granted today. Last chip on our little history here, went from the 286 to the 386, then the 486, which had over 1 million transistors on it and also a built-in math coprocessor, dramatically increasing the performance of these 486 base computers. Moving on, we'll take a look at some of the science behind the tiny transistors found on our chips, which is right this way.